Good morning and welcome to Monday. I'm Joe Jaquin, CEO of the Patriot Trading Group. Jason, I've got the echo going, so he's got a channel open. He'll take care of it. 800-951-0592, Patriot Radio News Hour, Patriot Trading Group. The website at allamericangold.com and all kinds of articles. You know, got to be part of your daily routine. Get out there, keep yourself in the know. I've got another request from our web guy. Thank you, Jason, from our web guy, or Jack, I'm not sure, or Bernice, whoever's running the boards up there in Colorado. We're starting to add to our folks up there at the Front Range, 1360khnc.com. A big shout-out, to Ramon at 1010KXXT. They were hit with one of those horrible ransomware attacks where the company has been taken over by, some Russian hackers. It's the Russians. They've done it. And they want them to pay the money or they won't release it and all this stuff. So Ramon, I don't know how he does it, but he's taking his cell phone and tapping into the 1360 stream, somehow taking his cell phone, putting it into the KXXT board to get the show out on the air in Phoenix. So Phoenix, I know that the quality isn't what it's been, but this is why. But Ramon's doing. Listen, the guy is incredibly resourceful. I liken it to those shows. The people are out there in the bush in the middle of nowhere. Sometimes they don't even have any clothes on, and you just gotta make do with what you got. That's Ramon. He's MacGyvered the whole thing just to get this show on the air. So a big shout out to him. My web guy sent me this text message this morning. When this show is over, Patriot Trading Group, we have a Facebook page. 1360's got a Facebook page. I don't know if I'm going to assume KXXT, Family Values Radio, probably does as well. But this show will get posted on there. He needs you to write some nice things about me. I don't know why. I don't understand all the particulars, but this is going to help get this message out to more and more people. And it's awkward. It's uncomfortable, when you got to fish for compliments. So I figured I would help you guys out and give you some things that because what can you say? So I wrote some things down of things that you could say, nice things about me. He's incredibly handsome, right? You can go with that one. I mean, I've got a body and a face made for radio. You could throw that in there. Maybe, how about, he may be the most intelligent person in the world. I mean, there's so many great things you could say about me that my web guy would appreciate it if you would do it, and he wants you to do it through the Facebook thing. I don't know. But this is my impassioned plea. If you do this, then I can stop asking. And then we can talk about more important stuff. So please go out there. And like I said, I gave you a few already. Just to get it started, right? Get your juices flowing. So that'll be up there later today on the Patriot Facebook page. Don't forget, obviously, the 1360 Facebook page. I will just like them all. Why not? 800-951-0592. It is Monday. We had football. Football was back. Do you care? The Broncos are playing tonight. The Cardinals won their game yesterday. I don't know. I'm not that excited about it. I'll be honest. The whole atmosphere around the flag and patriotism and all of these things, it's turned me off. It has, and I thought maybe this time it would be different than the last time. And guess what? It's not. It's not different. And I don't know if you saw, all these fires, right? We obviously got to talk about the fires. And last week I was like, man, is this a sign? Come to find out, especially in Oregon, most of these fires being human caused, deliberately caused, arsonists. Now, don't say they're Antifa or however you pronounce. Don't say that, because we all know that in Oregon, everybody's a Republican, and I'm going to be positive somehow, some way, it'll be Donald Trump's fault that some guy started all these fires. I'm sure of it. But yes, they arrested a guy. He actually got arrested for starting one, and they let him go, of course, because that's what they do. And then he started 6 more. Yeah, brilliant. Just incredible. It's incredible. All the things that are I can't even really deal with it anymore. I stopped watching the new, like CNN, Fox. I can't watch them anymore. I want to, but I can't. Right? And CNN by far is so gone. It's incredible now what it is that you have to believe in this country, and it makes sense. You know what? I should have known it when the bars could open, but the churches couldn't. That's all you needed to know, really. That's it. The beginning of the end. Another hurricane going to come. This one, I don't think very powerful, but it's supposed to be a lot of rain coming to the New Orleans area. So all of our listeners out there, be smart. Don't put yourself in a bad situation. And let's hope for the best as well. That last one actually worked out okay. It hit in a perfect spot, I guess. So hopefully we'll get lucky again. Got a lot of things to talk about today. Patriot Radio News Hour. I know it's Monday. No one likes Monday. But we'll be back right after the break. 800-951-0592, Patriot Radio News Hour on this Monday, the 14th of September. Flying by, almost halfway through September now. I think we're, 50 days, less than 50 days from the election. Is there ever going to be a debate? We'll have to wait and see. The pollsters were busted again. All these polls that say Biden's winning? Apparently, one of the big flaws is they keep polling more Democrats than Republicans. So, shocking, right? Gee, I wonder how that's going to turn out. But I was talking to them. I've got a couple of friends, not very many. Matter of fact, I lost a friend over the weekend. It's true. He says that I have jinxed our high school football team because I was not optimistic enough about what was going to happen, whether we're going to play or not play, and if we do play, how good we're going to be. So I'm down a friend today. But other than that, we were talking about these polls, and we all kind of agreed. The reason why they always have more Democrats than Republicans in these polls is most Republicans are, you call me and you hit me up with, I'm taking a poll. Sorry, don't got time. Click. I mean, just that fast. I got stuff to do. Right? So this is probably, I'm certain of it. The reason being is maybe maybe we need to be a little less busy. I'm out of here trying to make a living, provide for my family. The pursuit of happiness is what's important. And the word pursuit is the most important. That's what makes it. When you talk about life's unfair, you hear this, life's unfair. It's true, it is. Can be. But it's what you do about it, right? It's how you pursue, right? Do you just take your ball and bat and go home? Or do you fight for what you believe in, right? And this is what we do and how you fight. And obviously we're seeing how not to fight right now, aren't we? Which is totally lost. All of us all together. I was listening to one of the ads that was running on our station and talking about defunding the police. And, of course, we had that assassination attempt over the weekend. I don't know if you saw that or not. And then these cops were sitting in their car. And this person runs right up to the window, the passenger side window, and just unloads and runs away. And then the ambulance comes, and people were trying to block the ambulance. I mean, this is what's happening out here, and you're sitting there thinking about, I don't know, what should I buy stocks today? Really? Right? That's what you're thinking? I don't think so. It is truly amazing. Last week, here's another great one. Last week, I guess, well, let me finish my point. And next time a pollster calls for you Republicans, we may have to take time to answer. Actually, don't. I love it when they think they're going to win. And then they act so shocked when they don't. But last week, the government talked about inflation again. Now, remember, a big part of why gold is going to be significantly higher than today in the very near future. And I don't like putting prices on things. I don't. Right? You know why you need to hold gold. If you don't know why you need to own it, go back to living under a rock, okay? You get what you get. Either you're going to prepare for what everybody and their brother and mother knows is coming, or you're not. Right? Either you're going to be one of those people that says, I will not be reliant upon somebody else for my success, or you're not. It's that simple. And when you sit there and you look at the central bank wants inflation. Right? We know this now. For the last 12 years, they've been telling us how there isn't any. Right? And they had the big meeting out there in Jackson Hole. Jackson Hole, well, they actually didn't go this year, right? The virtual meeting. Right? They all zoomed in there. And they talked about how they're going to try to create this inflation, and let's get rid of 2%. Just like I told you was going to happen. And just like I told you when they first came, when they first created this 2%, most people don't know this. The media would have you believe that's been the rule forever. It hasn't been. We got that with Ben Bernanke in the financial crisis. Yeah, that was one of the new tools of the toolkit. Inflation targeting. Right. Sounds good, doesn't it? If you're a hunter, right, you want to make sure your sights are right. You go out and you do some target practice and make sure your aim is true. And if you get the opportunity, you're going to be able to have success, right? That's kind of what they're implying. We're going to have success because we're going to target this inflation. See, we need it to be higher. So that really poses two questions. The first one being, why does it need to be higher? Because I think when you understand what inflation really is, you would most likely say, no, I don't want inflation. Right? As a consumer, if you understood what the definition of inflation truly was, you would say, most people would say, no, thank you. Inflation simply means what you work for, the money that you work for. We want it to buy less. Now, they don't say it like that. No, they try to say, well, no, we want the debt to be worth more. Right? Because that way, right, if you got a house or a car, well, a car doesn't work very well, does it? Inflation doesn't matter what the price of the car is. The second you drive that car off the lot, right, it's worth way less than what you owe on it. But you get my point. They need these debts, and they've securitized them, and they've done all these fancy things to it. They need it to be worth more, whether people actually pay for the debt or not. And last week, they came out and said, hey, inflation was hotter. But because of the COVID thing, the inflation was still only 1.3%, according to the central bank in our government. Yep, inflation's only 1.3%. Now, rents have never been higher. Housing prices have never been higher. Used car prices have never been higher. New car prices have never been higher. The price of lumber has never been higher. You think about all the fires burning in the West, and if you knew how much lumber was going for right now, they're saying that because of the increase in the cost of lumber, it's added $17,000 to the price of a home. And we watch it all burn instead of harvesting it, but, what do I know? So we have food prices ridiculous. And out of boredom now, we've got one son who lives in Illinois, going to college there. Our older son, he's a senior in high school. He's going to be 18 here in a few months. Believe me, the only time we see him is when he's hungry and he needs money. Other than that, we never see him. So our lives have changed. I used to spend all of their childhood, I was driving to practice, right? It was basketball practice. It was football practice. It was a basketball game, baseball, whatever it was, flag football, you name it, we played it. And you drove your kids around, and you used to divide and conquer with your wife. Your wife took one kid, you took the other kid. You were busy. Well, I don't have to do that anymore. So now, believe it or not, I actually go shopping with I actually look forward to go. It gives me something to do. It's sad. I know my life is so sad. Go and shop. It's crazy expensive. You used to fill up the shopping cart, pack it in, and it'd be like $100. Now you fill up the shopping cart, and I'm not even saying it's packed. $300. $300. And you're like, what did we buy? And they're sitting there saying there's no inflation. For those of you on a fixed income, I got bad news for you. Your cost of living adjustment that you get every year. Going to be another stinker again this year. You're probably going to get, I don't know what the number's going to be, but my guess is maybe $5 a month. That's going to be your, because our best and our brightest. Think about, who it is that we're allowing to determine what inflation is. Right? It's the proverbial, let's let the wolf guard the hen house and see how that works out for us. So these bankers are saying, they just did it. They just released it last week that inflation is only running at 1.3%. Now, in their eyes, that means it can run way hotter than the 2% they've been talking about because, they're now going to do inflation, instead of inflation targeting, we're going to do inflation averaging. And since we've been so far below average, now we can go way higher now. Well, it's kind of funny because according to Harvard, maybe these guys are at least equally as smart. They're saying that the official number is nowhere close to reality, and they're saying that distortions from the official CPI report can be seen as, they give examples, used car pricing. Now, I've used new car pricing, right? I've told you about that. Do you know, according to the government, since like the mid-1990s, the price of a new car, there's no inflation at all? Now, I know we all know the average price of a new car in the mid-1990s was what? 15 grand? Maybe, right? Go crazy. Let's call it 20. What's it today? 40, 50? And yet, this is official, there is no inflation. So the Harvard study says, let's look at used car pricing. They said that they showed the biggest monthly jump in used car pricing since 1969. And the latest number they just put out. So the one that I told you, they said, hey, inflation's only 1.3%. In that number, the used car price had the biggest jump since 1969. But it's actually still far short of the increase actually seen by the used car dealers themselves. In other words, they're saying, hey, used car prices went up, But when you actually look at the price that they went up by, the central bank and the government's like, that's too high. So they come up with methodology and they just lower the number. Even though used car prices hit a new all-time record high, the largest increase since 1969, in the eyes of our bankers, used car prices are just like new car prices. Nothing. It's fine. And you sit there and you think about what this means for all of us. And why do I bring it up? Why do they need to lie about the number? You know, they used to have inflation. Look it up yourself, but I'll tell you, because that's what I like to do. Inflation used to run 4 or 5% for decades until a change was made in the 90s. I'll tell you all about that when we return.
Yes, ma'am, by God be darned.
800-951-0592. We're talking about inflation. It is one of the primary reasons why you need to hold gold. Matter of fact, because of the endless printing of money, even more of a reason why you need to hold gold. Think about how much we're printing now. Now, for the first time ever, we spent more than twice as much as we've taken in, right? The new deficit numbers, they keep rising. Now we're going to have, the little number is going to be 3.2 or 3.3 trillion. The big number is going to be 4.5 trillion now, right? All of these dollars that are just made up out of thin air, not to mention what the Federal Reserve's done to the balance sheet. But they've taken all of these things, and it started back in the 80s. You know, back when they used to track the CPI. Remember that? You don't hear that anymore. The Consumer Price Index. They don't track it that way. You know, you used to have items in eggs, bread, bacon, a pound of hamburger, you know, stuff like that. They used to. Now think about, as a country, we're still at, give or take, 60% of people owning their home. So logically, you would think, well, let's take housing, you know, the price of a home, because still the majority of people still technically own or are in that. You would think they would take that number. They don't. They used to, but they don't anymore. So they must take the rent then, right? No, they don't. Matter of fact, in the 1990s, Alan Greenspan, again, who I've told you all will go down in history much differently than what he thought he was when we were calling him the maestro in the 90s. He changed inflation. Matter of fact, now inflation doesn't even track inflation, if you really want to put it this way. Think about the money supply. We used to count that too. Remember the M1, M2, M3 money supply? That's gone. We don't want you to know that, because there was a huge correlation between the increase in the money supply and inflation. And they came up with this substitution method. Well, if the price of beef goes up, you'll buy pork, right? If new car prices go up, you'll buy used cars, right? And if used cars go up, you'll just buy a cheaper one, or you know what I'm saying. They even got rid of housing prices altogether. They came up and they created their own. They called it the housing rent equivalent. And it's just a formula they made up. Doesn't track any actual number, doesn't track the actual price of a home, doesn't actually track rent prices, right? And they lie to you about what it costs. Now, obviously, all of us know they're lying, but we don't care enough, because we're just like, it is what it is. There's nothing we can do about it. Remember Red Fred? when I told you all these teachers are striking, they're going to the Capitol buildings, and I'm like, you're striking at the wrong place. You're really not mad at the state government. They don't own a printing press. It's not their fault that $40,000 or $50,000 for 9 months of work isn't enough money. They didn't create that. And a prime example, when this guy did the study for Harvard and said that the central bank is lying to us all, he gave a number. He said they're misrepresenting it by 40%. That's how much they're understating the cost of living in this country by 40%. Here's a great example. And I always go back to the early 1900s. And for a lot of people, that's too far. You can't relate when I tell you about a $20 bill and a $20 gold piece. So let's go to, 1971, shall we? Because that's when we went off the gold standard. And what that meant, and a lot of people get that confused. They took the gold from us in 1933. Who's they? The central bankers. The central bankers, with the help from our elected officials, who they made sure they got the right guys in there. Right? That's how we got the central bank again back in 1913. Is they got married and got people elected that would be sympathetic to the bankers. They wanted power. They wanted money. When they closed all the banks, you know why they closed them all? Because J.P. Morgan was really upset. The Rothschilds were really upset. The Warburgs from Germany were very upset. Because as the United States started to develop into a superpower, and you had everybody going west, all these little banks started popping up that weren't owned by J.P. Morgan or the Rothschilds or the Warburgs. They didn't own them. And so when they shut the banks in 1933, over half the banks never reopened. And they didn't like it, right, because the deposits were leaving their bank, so they came up with a plan to get those deposits back. Think about fast forward to today. And those same banks are still in power today that were in power when they took all the gold from us in 1933. Now, we couldn't own gold in the U.S. It was illegal for you. Matter of fact, the only gold you could hold outside of jewelry, if you were a dentist or a jeweler or an artist, you could use it, but you couldn't have gold in your pocket. Was collectible gold, which is why we like the pre-33s, but that's a different story. But you couldn't own it legally in the U.S. from 1933 until the early 1970s. That blows people away. They don't realize it, but it's true. The only ones that could demand gold for dollars from that in that time period was foreign governments that bought U.S. debt. In other words, if they had bought, hypothetically in 1945, they bought a 10-year note. That note came due in 1955. They could technically demand, hey, instead of Federal Reserve notes, pay us in gold. We'll talk about that next. Talking about inflation. And inflation's complicated. See, because the United States didn't have inflation for over 100 years. Didn't have a central bank. Couldn't print money out of thin air. Matter of fact, the only time inflation came around was war. The War of 1812, there was inflation. As soon as that war ended, the inflation went away. Civil War. inflation. As soon as that war ended, inflation went away. And $20 bought the same thing 5 years later, 10 years later, 50 years later, 100 years later. We didn't even need to have a minimum wage. There's no point. Everyone knew what everything cost, and it all cost the same. Wouldn't that have been nice? Think about how competitive we could have been still today if we didn't have inflation. Right? $40,000 would be and you'd be wealthy beyond belief, right? But no, that the bankers, they couldn't make enough money that way. They wanted more power. Believe me, this is what it's all about, is power. So when they finally got enough of their buddies elected in Congress and came up and said we need to have oversight, right, of the banking industry, and oversight's okay. Doesn't mean we have to have a central bank, but of course, they knew what they were doing. It took them 20 years to get rid of gold from the citizenry. And if you want to believe that we have 8,000 metric tons in Fort Knox and West Point and whatever, okay, that's what they claim. We've got 8,000 metric tons of gold in reserve. The vast majority of that coming from gold confiscation. And then, of course, they changed the price to $35 overnight and got all these foreign governments to send gold to the U.S. because they're like, wait a minute, this is $20. Now you're saying it's $35. I can buy more stuff. We got to 20,000 metric tons. And like I said, the only people that could demand gold for dollars was foreign governments. And when their treasury notes reached maturity, they had the option. They could roll it back over, right? They would just turn around and buy some more 10-year notes, pay us in dollars, or pay us in gold. Well, the whole world started saying, you know what? We want our gold back. Pay us in gold. So in 1971, when Richard Nixon closed the gold window, we had 20,000 metric tons before. We are down to this 8,000 that we have today. And I'll say allegedly because I don't really know who owns it, if it's really there or not. But this is what happened. These central banks and these countries in particular were saying, we don't want dollars, we want gold. And of course, remember in the 70s when they shut the gold window, what happened? Gold was $42 then. They set a new price, $42. So we went from 20 to 35 to 42, and then they allowed gold to trade freely. And of course, we know what happened. Gold ran all the way to $800, remember? And remember the huge inflation of the 70s. And the central banks got smart. And they said, man, we got to do something about this inflation. And they came up with a great idea. Let's just change how we count it. Nobody will know, and we'll come out with a bunch of gibberish that'll sound really smart. And everybody just wink, wink, nod, nod, and go along with it. And our elected officials, who we help put in there, they're going to go along with it because we're going to tell them, think about all the more money you're going to be able to spend. 1971, the debt was $400 billion. $250 billion of that was from World War II, by the way. And now, of course, we've got $27 trillion in counting. And, of course, now gold, right, a $20 gold piece, which used to be $20, was $20 for 100 years, is now $2,200 and rising. And all the while, right, they've been lying to us. They started lying to us in the 80s. Lied some more in the 90s. Lied again in the 2000s. And now all of a sudden they're sitting here trying to tell us that we haven't had inflation for decades. Do you know that it's only been in the last 20, I'll say 20 years, but really more like 15 years, that COLA adjustments have been under 4%? And not only did they go below 4%, I mean, it's almost never 2%. I mean, it's usually like we got today, 0 to 0, somewhere between 0 and 1.8% for the last almost 20 years. How did that happen? Was it magic? And think about it. The amount of debt that we've got into has quadrupled and then some. And now, just like in the 50s and the 60s, all these countries and all these central banks and everybody, all of a sudden, we want gold, not dollars. It went from 42 to 800. What do you think it's going to do this time? Patriot Radio News Hour, final segment coming up. (800-951-0592) Patriot Radio News Hour, final segment on this Monday. So they don't have gold to take away, right? They did that. They can't close the gold window, right? Where you could foreign governments could exchange dollars for gold through the Treasury. Right? They got rid of that. They've misrepresented the price of inflation, got rid of money supply, got rid of everything they could think of. And now they're like, man, we got this problem because the whole system's built on this thing called debt. And if the debt isn't worth more than it was the year before, it all falls apart. And you think about, and we've talked about it ad infinitum, how many people aren't paying their bills. They're not paying the mortgage. They're not paying their commercial notes, right? They're just not paying. And of course, there's a moratorium. And the central bank's buying all this debt. They own a third of all the mortgages now. And it's still not enough. I know what happens next. They take the currency away. I mean, that's what's going to happen. Right? We're going to go to some digital currency. There's going to be some crisis. I mean, I got a pretty good grasp what the crisis is going to be. We didn't get enough inflation, so the banks are insolvent, and we got to do something. And what they're going to do is create a digital currency that will allow them, with the stroke of a key. See, right now they pretended that they could get inflation by dropping interest rates. Remember that game they played? Of course, that doesn't work anymore. I mean, interest rates are 0. They still say we don't have inflation. Heck, places have gone negative. I mean, even here in the U.S., even though they say we're not negative, real rates are negative here. Even with the crappy 1.3% inflation they say it's negative. Real rates are negative. Of course nobody wants it. Why do you think everybody wants gold again? Because they know what's coming. And now with the electronic currency, I don't have to worry about changing an interest rate or talking about inflation. They just go to their keyboard, change the exchange rate, and presto. That $100,000 overnight will buy you 50. And if that isn't enough, 90 days later, that $100,000 that used to buy you $100,000 that now only buys you 50 will only buy you 25. until they get it to whatever number they finally miraculously need it to be. And that's why you hold gold. Every dollar you move into gold, whatever that 100 grand would have bought today, it'll buy it in 10 years. The same thing. Now, of course, that same thing that's 100 grand today may be $1 million 10 years from today. But you'll be able to do it if you put it into gold. U.S. $20 gold pieces, $2,200. Gold's up $20 today, 1,970. Silver is up as well. Silver, 27 1/4. 800-951-0592. The best hedge against inflation. Been the best hedge for hundreds of years. Will always be the best hedge. That's gold. Make sure you got some. We'll be back tomorrow.